Alex Guy are here with Mr. Spady. It's November 1st, 2013, around 3 p.m. Thanks for taking time out of your day, Mr. Spady.
Yeah, sure.
All right, well, first I'm going to have you sign a consent form. You got a pen? I have one.
I didn't bring it with me.
I have them. Got one right here.
All right.
So if you could just print your name right here. And then... And then, actually, print your name one more time right here, and then sign and date. I filled out your address and phone number for you. This is basically just giving me permission to do work with this interview and then turn it over to Mary Lanning so that they can do what they need to do with it for the 100th anniversary.
Yeah.
So, yep, sign and date.
Okay.
All right, thank
I
you.
go by Dick, actually. But
Bad Dick? Okay.
yeah.
All right, well, just have some questions, and starts off with just, early questions, and then I have some about your baseball career, personal life, and work life, and then just some general questions about Mary Lanning. So I'll put this a little closer to you, actually. You're fine. I would rather pick up your voice than mine.
Right.
Okay, so where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up here in Hastings. I actually went to kindergarten in Sutton, Nebraska. But we lived here in Hastings before, and then afterwards.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your family when you were younger.
When I was younger? Well, we lived here in west part of Hastings, and my mother took care of us, of course, at home, and my dad started out working for the telephone company, and in conjunction with working for the telephone company, they had a baseball team, and so he played baseball, and that's how I got into baseball. My dad was a pitcher, and we played catch in the backyard.
Okay. So what kind of influence did your parents have on you? You said that your mom took care of you at home, and your dad.
Well, yeah, she was a mother that stayed at home. And when she was younger, she worked in the Kool-Aid factory here.
Oh, okay.
And then when she had me, I was the first of 4 children. And then she was a stay-at-home mom, as were most of them.
Yeah. So what did she do in the Kool-Aid factory?
Well, she worked in the Kool-Aid factory, which was located just over here, a few blocks, on 3rd Street, and she pounded the envelopes with Kool-Aid in them flat with a pounder.
That's an interesting job.
And then she and the rest of the family, that at that time was most of the help was family, and then young women. But she was he had had him taste his products.
Yeah.
So she was a taster too.
Ooh, that'd be a pretty good job, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that you went to elementary school in Sutton. So where'd you go on to high school, or did you go on to college after that?
I just went 1 year in Sutton, kindergarten.
Okay.
Then I went to elementary school here in Hastings.
Okay. And then,
Longfellow School.
so did you go to high school in Hastings after that as well?
I went to high school in Hastings, graduated from high school here.
So did you go on to college after that, or was high school?
Yes, I went to Hastings College for 1 semester for 2 years, but I was playing professional baseball at age 18, and so I couldn't get in more than a semester because I had to go to spring training down in Florida in February.
Okay, so you left college to go down there and play baseball?
No, I just kept going to college, but only a semester at a
Oh,
time.
okay.
But I missed some years because we were in playoffs maybe, and so I would miss a year here and there.
Okay. What was the setting like? How many people were in a class? Things like that.
Oh gosh, we had, there were pretty fair-sized classes, I'd say. And we had maybe 80 to 100 in a class, something like that, in high school anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't in grade school.
Yeah. So you said you went to Hastings College. What buildings were up at that time, and what was the college like compared to what it is now?
Well, it was pretty run down. The buildings were old.
Mm-hmm.
They did have a couple dormitories, and they had McCormick Hall,
Yeah.
and they had a library that isn't there anymore, I don't think. Maybe part of it is. And then they had the church, or the chapel as they called it. And there weren't a lot of other buildings around, maybe 1 or 2 small buildings. But at that time, they had moved in some surplus temporary buildings that were moved off of the ammunition depot to give them a little more room. We even had some classes in those. Yeah.
So a little bit different than it is now.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, now get into the baseball career a little bit. You mentioned that your dad kind of started you into baseball, but when did you start playing? Just things like that. What position did you start playing in? Just
we just played. As kids, we just played with ourselves. We'd get a bunch and play another bunch on a vacant lot or up in Hartwell, not Hartwell Park, but the park up north where Hastings Utilities is.
Okay.
Or we'd just play in the street.
Yeah.
But we made up our own, and we finally ended up building our own backstop with chicken wire and some posts. And we would play over there in some extra space that the utilities had over there in North Hastings.
Okay, you mentioned that you played baseball here. So how did you go from playing baseball here to then eventually be involved with the Dodgers organization?
Well, Hastings was always a baseball town. They had town team clubs, and they were one of the first to start with the midget leagues. And of course, we had a good baseball diamond. It was called Pershing Field, and the bricks around there are still Pershing. They were there when Pershing field was built back in the was built really back in the dirty 30s by PWA, as were a lot of our other buildings in town and in Nebraska. And now it's they're renovating it out there now, but we had a good field if you got up that to that age. And then when we played midget ball, we played that around different parks, and you know, each park had a softball diamond usually, and so you could always find a place to play your midget ball. And then later on, we even played right in Duncan Field, the midget baseball. And so I was in one of those, the first year they had that. And then they had brownies, they call them, because the coach's name was Brown. And they were kind of, you know, in between the midgets and the Legion juniors. It was all Legion baseball.
Yeah.
And American Legion baseball. And so I played then on the Legion team. I was pitcher on the Legion team. And we played Grand Island, Kearney, and other Columbus, Norfolk, other teams around from the various towns. Had our own league.
Yeah.
And then we even played Omaha and Lincoln teams too.
Okay, so when you were playing in that, did like someone see you and notice that you were fairly good and told you to, you know, come with them to play with in the Dodgers organization, or how did you make that jump?
I was recruited by actually I used to play some semi-pro ball even while I was playing for the Legion, because I could throw pretty hard.
Yeah.
And so they saw me there. The scouts were always around, and I was all-state, was an all-state pitcher, and then I think it was the next year. Back then, you couldn't play if you were over 16 by January 1st, I think it was. I think now they can play till they're 18. But so I just started playing semi-pro, and I pitched for several towns, you know, but I didn't take any pay.
Yeah.
And it was kind of fun playing for different towns. Glenville, I know, I played for them, and other towns. And I played for the Hastings town team that one year. And then they used to have what they called the Esquire game, which was an all-America game. And they'd pick one person from Nebraska out of the all-staters and such to go to a game, a tryout game, they call it, which then they pulled in people and I know ours, Pepper Martin, the old Osage for the, you know, for St. Louis.
Yeah.
Came, and then the coaches were around, one from Omaha University and one from Creighton, and the coach for Nebraska, Tony Sharp, and all those people, they had them be the judges. and we played a game in Omaha. And so I was picked as the winner, and went back to what they called the Brooklyn against the World game.
Mm-hmm.
And that lasted several years, but I was in the first one. And that was a paid trip. It didn't cost me a thing. They flew Floyd Olds, who was, Floyd was the sports editor for the World Herald at the time. And World Herald was tied in with large newspaper, Hearst newspapers, and they were sponsoring, along with the Dodgers, this Brooklyn against the World.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was on the World team.
Okay.
And I represented Nebraska, and then we had them from Canada, we had them from Hawaii, which was just a possession at the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't a state. And we had them from, I believe from, I don't think we had one from Cuba. Puerto Rico, I think we had one from Puerto Rico. Panama maybe. And all over a lot of Eastern and California teams, or players, I should say. Took them back for 2 weeks, and we worked out there on Ebbets Field, and we got introduced to all the players, and that happened to be the first year that Jackie Robinson played for the Dodgers. And so we were introduced there, and I attended along with the others. We sat right down there by the Dodgers in Ebbets Field, and when they played the Braves, and then we had various activities they took us to. We went to Broadway and went to one of those shows. We took us to the beach. They took us all kinds of places. Coney Island on
The roller coasters?
the roller coasters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we just had quite a time. And then the Olds would write a cover of me every day that he was there, and send it back or call it back, and they'd have a little squib about what happened today and such. And then we ended up beating the Brooklyn team, which really wasn't just Brooklyn. It was Brooklyn and other New York players.
Okay.
And around the fringe of New York. So they had a pretty good team, but we ended up beating in a series that we had. Took 2 out of 3. We played 3 games.
Okay.
Yeah. And that gave me a contact with the Brooklyn family,
Okay.
because their trainers took care of us and their people. So, and for them it was a scouting thing too.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But there were all kinds of scouts there.
Yeah.
From all different teams.
So that was kind of how you got your foot in the door with the Dodgers organization.
Well, yeah. I had offers from 4 or 5 different teams. The St. Louis Cardinals was one, and I went to attend a game with them in St. Louis, and then the Braves were another, and the Giants were another. The Giants offered me a scholarship at Yale, and because there was a pitcher's coach there at the time that was the best coach in the country, I guess. They wanted me to go there first and then come play in their system. But I didn't really care to go clear back that far.
Yeah.
And I figured all they did back there was race canoes, stuff like that.
Yeah. So how did you end up choosing the Dodgers organization?
Well, I think they had a good scout guy by the name of Burt Wells down in Larned, Kansas, and he'd kind of pester you and keep after you. He'd come up in business, and he convinced us that was the first year they had Vero Beach, which is they were located in Vero Beach, and it was a former naval air station, and they had a lot of land there. They just got that, and they kind of had this sales point that they were going to treat you to all the intricacies of the game that you had to know about before you could qualify to play at the major leagues.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a sales job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how was, well, I guess, how old were you when you left to go be with the Dodgers, and where did you go first when you left?
Well, I was 18.
Okay.
And I went, the first place they sent me was in Greenwood, Mississippi. And that was not, at that time, a very good place to be.
Yeah.
So I said, no, I'd rather be somewhere closer to home. And so they sent me to Ponca City, Oklahoma, and then what they call the KOM League. And that's one that quite a few people, it was a good league. But that I was close, my folks would come and visit and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew some people there. And I stayed with them. I rented a room from them. And we won the league that year. And I had a good year. I did have an injury, but still end up with a good record. I think it was something like 10-4.
That was pretty good.
And we had a lot of good pitchers. And that was my first year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how many years did you play professional baseball?
Well, it was off and on. It was a span of 8 years. But like I say, I didn't play every year.
Mm-hmm.
If we were in the playoffs. And the year that I played down in Miami, we were not, or we were in the playoffs. And I didn't come home. And Pepper Martin was the manager down there then. That was quite an experience. I went home with his family afterwards. They wanted me to come home. He had some daughters that he wanted me to meet. They looked just like Pepper. But it was fun.
Okay, so where were all the different places that you played?
Well, I played probably most of the time that there were 2 different years that I played in the Western League for Pueblo, and at that time Lincoln and Omaha and Des Moines, Sioux City was Wichita, and a few other teams were in it. There were 8 teams, 8 different cities in it. The second time I played for them, they were, and Denver was in it. Denver, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, Albuquerque, Amarillo, and then also Des Moines and Sioux City and Lincoln and Omaha.
Okay. So, how much were you making at that time?
Oh, not much at all.
Not much at all?
I think the last year that I played, I was making $300 a month.
Oh. But at the time, was that decent money, or?
Well, not really.
Not really?
Not really. It was, see, the difference was, back then they had, when you signed your first contract, they had what they called a reserve clause in the contract. And that reserve clause gave the team all the power, so to speak. There was no negotiation. And of course, everybody just went along with it because all they wanted to do was play baseball.
Yeah.
And that was before TV and everything else. And so what they would do, well, Ricky was good at this. He's the one that kind of invented the farm system.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it first with the Cardinals. And they got up to 20-some farm teams, I believe. And the Dodgers, then he went from the Cardinals to the Dodgers. And he was part owner then. And he got him up, got the Dodgers up to 25 or so farm teams. And they had 3 AAA clubs, which is the next step to the majors.
Mm-hmm.
And they had 2 or 3 AA clubs and about the same number of A clubs. And at those levels they stockpiled their people.
Mm-hmm.
And they would then either trade them off if they needed somebody, or they would hold them there until they needed them. So they had AAA clubs that could beat most of the major league clubs at that time.
Yeah.
And same way with AA.
Okay.
And even A in a lot of instances. You had no one that was, they started a Players Association. I'm a lifetime member of the Players Association. But that was set up originally just to kind of help out players that were no longer able to play baseball, that didn't have any money, and try to help them a little bit.
Yeah.
That was the original idea of that. And of course, the only ones they have given to it was the players themselves.
Yeah.
And of course, you couldn't give very much.
Yeah.
Now I got a bonus, but to begin with, if they really wanted you, they would pay you a bonus to begin with. So I was a bonus baby, they call them. But after that, what you make is
Not very good.
not very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how, you mentioned A, AA, AAA, where did you get to?
Well, I had a cup of coffee in AAA, but that's where I got hurt the second. Out in California, I went out there, and I got an injury, and then I was coming back from the injury, and so they had me, as I was coming back, I was with the Hollywood Stars for a while, and then I hurt it again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just was pretty much that year totally out of it. And I never did. What happened was I dislocated my ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought a new pair of spikes. And that was actually San Jose, which was a Class C club that I went to because they, after I was with a Class B team, and I went to C because, well, I had an experience. You learn something as you go along. I had an experience with the manager there, who was a Brooklynite, or a New Yorkite anyway, and he was kind of nasty, and having played Legion ball all these years, it wasn't, and that was my second year. Having played Legion ball all these years, you didn't experience that. The Legionnaires treated you right.
Yeah.
And but pro ball's different. It was then, even more than now, I think.
Yeah.
Just a lot of insults and everything else is fair game.
Mm-hmm.
And we were playing a team, and I came in to close out the game, and I had to pitch to three guys to close the game out, and so I had plenty of rest, so I just cranked up and threw three balls right down the middle and struck out three guys in a row with just three pitches.
Yeah.
And I could do that because, I'd had so much rest.
Mm-hmm.
And what's he do, but the next day put me in, and we were playing a better team, I think, but he put me in relief again, and I struck out a guy or two, and then the next guy got a bat on the ball, and it went out just the right spot, and he got a double or a triple out of it and brought in a run or two. And he just lambasted me right in front of everybody out there. And I said, "I'm not going to play for you. Ship me out." Well, then he turns up being a manager later. He got disciplined. I never got disciplined because I just told him what I thought.
Yeah.
And but he was cussing and slinging stuff at me I'd never heard before. And so it's a good thing. So anyway, I went out to Santa Barbara out there, and then I got that first injury, and then that's when they sent me to the Hollywood Stars. That was the Pacific Coast League at that time. That was AAA. And so I worked out there and for a while, but it just never came back. I had a little short stint with St. Paul up in the International League, about the same way. But quite often what they do is they take you to one team and then option you to another. Mm-hmm. And the most time I had was in A-ball.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you finally gave up baseball?
Well, let's see. I would have been, when I finally gave it up, 18, 5, 7. I think I was 24, 25.
Okay. So then after baseball, what did you come back to do?
Well, after baseball, I came back, and I finished off my degree, and I got a master's degree in ag economics. I got my bachelor's in farm management and agronomy, and then I got my master's in agricultural economics, and took a job with the Game and Parks Commission.
Okay. So how did baseball translate from the sport into your working life and just like lessons that you've learned?
Well, you learned a lot. I learned a lot in baseball. just about people and competition and being in a lot of different places around the country and seeing how things are so different. I even went back to Greenwood, Mississippi one year because Fresco Thompson called me, who was vice president of the Dodgers, who had followed me all the way, and I think he's the guy that kind of got me signed in the first place. And he encouraged me to go back with Lou Rochelle because Rochelle was having trouble too. So I went back, and by that time my arm was, I hurt my arm after that. And so I didn't have the speed on the ball, and I didn't have the liveliness, my fastball. And it took me a long time to get that back. If I hadn't hurt that, I have no question that I'd have been elevated up, because Connie Mack, who was the old owner and manager of the Philadelphia Athletics, stopped by my second year down there in spring training, and with his team, they were playing an exhibition game with the Dodgers, and watched me throwing on the strings. The strings is something, they had a couple posts and strings across where the strike zone is, That's where they'd have the pitchers go out and warm up, and then they'd work with them to see what kind of stuff they had. And he was watching me on that, and I wondered who that guy is. Wear a hat and a suit and a tie and everything. He's a coach. Well, it was Connie Mack, and he's in the Hall of Fame. But he had his catcher go down there and got my other catcher I was thrown to out of the way, and he was calling pitches. Wanted to know what my, throw your fastball on the inside corner, and throw your curveball on the outside corner, stuff like that. And then he left with his team, didn't say anything. My manager told me the next day, my manager that first year, Pocket City, said, well, when they had their staff meeting, he said, Connie Mack wanted to buy me, but Ricky wouldn't sell me. And so that was my big chance.
Yeah.
But I had my good fastball then.
Yeah.
Because I could throw, if I cut loose, I could throw 95 to 100.
That's pretty good. Okay, so once you were done with baseball in college, what were your jobs? What were a few of the jobs you did, and then how did you get involved with Mary Lanning eventually?
Yeah, well, I was with the Game and Parks Commission right out of college, and I was a land manager. And then I kind of went up the ladder to, I was chief of land management. Well, I was an acquisition agent along with the manager on a hunting area out here by Sacramento, Nebraska, out by Holdridge, and developed that as a hunting area, and then acquired land along the interstate for the rest stops, or not really the highway rest stops, but the chain of lakes is what Steen called them. He was the director. Like you've got up here at Grand Island, and those sand pits that are along the way along the interstate. And then I went into Lincoln as chief of the land management division, and then I was assistant director, which which is what I was when Ed Wilkin came to visit me, who was in here as a partner, and asked me to come to McKinley and Lanning.
Okay.
And so I always liked to hunt and fish, but I was getting to the point that I wasn't hunting and fishing much. I was negotiating all kinds of deals and handling all kinds of administrative matters, which was all right, except that isn't why I wanted to be around the game and parks.
Yeah.
I kind of like to get out in the country.
So, what was the first position that you held with Mary Lanning, and how old were you when that came about?
I came back here, I was probably about in my I think I was probably 44, thereabouts, and that would have been in 73, but we had children then, and I took a year off before I joined them. We took them to Disneyland, and we got settled in our house, and I built them a playhouse. And then I came in 74, January 74, I think it was.
Okay.
And then I was on the board in 75, the board of the hospital board of trustees, 75, and I 22 years on the board until 97 when I retired from the hospital board. I stayed on the trust board.
Okay.
I'm still on the trust board. I was, of that 22 years, I was 12 years, the last 12 years I was the chairman. And so that pretty much took all of my time.
Yeah.
And we knew that even here, just to be able to do the job right, you had to, we sacrificed our time here at the trust if the hospital needed us for something.
Yeah. So what were some things that you did while you were on the board, and like what were some like daily type jobs that you did?
Well, of course, I was doing work here. I was doing farm management work here because most of the assets of the trust is farmland. And we've got around 6,000, 7,000 acres that we have developed now for irrigation. And that's a substantial source of income for our beneficiaries, which are the hospital, and that's the primary beneficiary. Sunnyside is also a beneficiary because of the two Froms that gave this land, and we have a few others that gave land. But with the hospital, you had to kind of. I got connected with the Rural Health Association. I felt that was important. I got connected with South Platte United Chamber of Commerce. We would attend those meetings, and I was, an officer of those various. I was president for a period of time of the Rural Health Association. That was an essential thing I felt to keep up a contact with what they call now Health and Human Services down at the state level. And we did some changing on some of the board. There were no physicians that were involved in board activities when I was on the board as just a member. And so I encouraged the board to have a physician, even if it's a non-voting position, but have a position on the board. So we set it up so that we could have we would let the medical staff pick that member, and had to be a willing member and attend the meetings, and that I think helped. And then later we had an opportunity to have a physician as well as that physician who did not vote but was I think Bob Anderson was the first like that he was a voting member, and he later then became chairman. And I think that was helpful. You've got to get people, communication is one of the biggest problems in healthcare, in hospitals, in any instance. You've got an environment there that is very stressful on the people working there, and you've got to have good communication. And I think communication really improved because you had a physician or two that you could ask questions about, and they can make recommendations, and they're operating in an area that they know what they're talking about. And our board members are not in the past weren't physicians, and we had no physician. We had 7 board members, and that was it. And they were usually chosen, by their status in the community, and were generally business people as opposed to medical people.
So
then we later added some women. Women hadn't been on the board either, and I think they nurses. Both of them were nurses, and that first time around, and that I think added to the breadth.
So when it was, on the board were just like people from the community, and then working with the people who were in the medical field, I could see how that could cause some problems. So has there been anything changed to, make it easier for them to communicate, or how has that relationship gotten better?
I don't know. To do it right, you've got to have an active board. And of course, I haven't been there since '97, and you've got to have an active board, and your chairman has to get out and get oriented and educated, and attend sessions with the administrator, the CEO, the Nebraska Hospital Association, for example, and groups like that, so that you interchange with them and talk to other members of that association and see how it's working for them too. And you've got to take the time to do it. And it's very difficult anymore to get that kind of input. But I think it's been complicated. It's been complicated because it's getting so technical anymore.
Yeah.
And it isn't, you got a lot of information you got access to, and they're trying to get past this privacy thing so that they can get everything computerized. But that's not easy either. And I think communication has become the biggest problem these days.
So when you were on the board, or just as you've seen Mary Lanning Healthcare, what do you think has been their biggest accomplishment, or the biggest thing that they've done that you think has been positive for?
Well, I think they've been very positive over the years. There are very few places that have had a situation where one family built the whole hospital and paid for it themselves, and outfitted it at the time with the top-notch equipment available at that time. They traveled to Europe and looked at other hospitals and came back and built Mary Lanning. And they had things at the time that others didn't in the U.S. Now, of course, the time goes by, and facilities get outmoded or worn out. So there's been a lot of building that's gone on in the last 40 or 50 years. But so has that happened in other communities as well, and it's gotten more competitive. It wasn't considered to be professional to advertise when I first joined the hospital, and look at it now. Look at it now. That was not accepted. It was not. It was looked down upon. Of course, lawyers, it was the same way, and they're advertising. Everyone's advertising, and we have become. We have been managed by promoters and advertising people, our whole society, really. And I think we need to understand that, and especially if we haven't got the basic core values established in our thinking. And I think that's one of the big challenges in not only healthcare, but in anything in our society.
Okay. You were the recipient of the William H. and Alice T. Lanning Award. Can you explain to me just a little bit about what this is and why you think you were chosen for that?
Well, I don't know. I guess it must have been there were enough people that were around when I was on the board, and some of the things that we got done. I think bringing the doctors together with the board, bringing everybody together. If you can keep at that, people appreciate that, and you got to let them all know what's going on. Like I say, you got to put everything on the table. And if you got a problem, get people together and find out what the problems are, and then try to work things out so that you don't alienate people unnecessarily. And take the time to do this, and get others that have thoughts on this and get it ironed out. And just the opposite of what the House of Representatives and the Senate for the U.S. are doing. The opposite. Now they're going to have to change. It's ridiculous. And so you have to have the willingness of the people to spend a little time doing this, and we had it. It was there. If you just give it a shot. And I think that needs to be done in all areas. And then people need to understand when they come in on this board, what the history of the board is, how it was set up in the first place, what the values were that the original donor had in mind, and kind of an orientation.
Okay. If you could give this award to one person that you worked with and you think was very influential, who would you give that to?
Well, I'd have to think way back, but I think there are a lot of them, and I don't know how I could pick between them. There are a lot of them that have had a lot to do with this. Past board members that I knew, as well as people right within the administrative structure and doctors on the medical staff and nurses. There are so many of them that I couldn't pick and choose, tell you the truth.
Okay.
Out of here, out of the trust, I would say it would be Ed Wilkin, because Ed was the administrator for a spell, and he always had a good connection with it. And he would go up to the hospital and greet people, and he wouldn't duck any problems, and he would always do what he felt was right.
Okay. So where do you see Mary Lanning, or where do you hope to see Mary Lanning go in the future?
That's a good question. That's a tough question to answer because of the way everything is kind of up in the air here. But I think the hospitals have a choice. Certainly, Mary Lanning has a choice to make. If somebody can describe healthcare to me versus hospital or medical care, hospitals are having fun just renaming their hospitals these days, and I don't think people know the difference, and I question whether even the hospitals know the difference. Difference between healthcare and medical center, for example. Well, if I was trying to interpret it, I'd say medical center would mean that you're probably concentrating more on specialties and specialists and building up all these accredited board certified specialists and having about everything you possibly could have, as well as some of the general practice physicians and healthcare. I guess I would think that might convert itself into something that goes into dietary. Boy, I don't know what's going on. Into diet and general health directions that would not require the level of medical specialties to be available. Now, if that's right, then that's quite a difference in choice. And I would hope that that Mary Lanning could still keep keep it all together in a way that gives them local access to a high level of specialty service as well as basic health care.
Okay. I know that you were involved with a lot of the landscaping around Mary Lanning.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved with that?
Well, I wasn't here too long. One reason I came back here too was my father was ill, and so I came. That was one of my driving forces, because I did have some other opportunities that I had an opportunity to maybe go overseas in some projects, but that was not really something conducive to my young family at the time either. And I came back here. He was getting worse, and he did pass away then in the hospital. And he was on the board before. He was on the board, and so I succeeded. That's the seat they kind of held open for me if they thought I was going to work out.
Yeah.
And I had a testing of a few, I think it was 1 or 2 years, and they asked me to be on the board. But the thing is, and your question, what was your question again? I'm not sure I'm answering it.
Well, how are you involved with the landscaping? Or how
Oh,
did
the
you get
landscaping,
involved?
yeah. Well, the landscaping started because when he passed away, our family, my mother and I talked about it, that we should have some sort of memorial for him. And about that same time, the trees along 7th Street, which were American elm, got borer damage and disease damage and died. And those trees had been there for a long time and provided shade for that end of the hospital. And Jim Kenny, who was the minister at the time, asked me to make some recommendations for what to do there. I don't know what's going on there. And I don't know if they're trying to, so we had a tree, and which was donated by the Game and Parks Commission employees when they found out my dad had passed away. And we put it right on the corner and dedicated that to him. And then I made up a landscape plan for the rest of the hospital. And my mother and I then contributed to a fund that we set up to keep going on that. And of course, you get something planted around the hospital, and then they tear it out because they're going to expand it or do something. And so each time we'd come in there and do something different. But the rock I used for the little emblem there, and was in my dad's writing right by as you come in the door to the hospital on the east side. And that was the start of it. And then each time there was something else done, we came in and landscaped it. And that was all, my idea there was, you've got to, I'm gonna find out what's
Okay.
the thought was that people in hospitals, it's a very antiseptic environment, and they're inside all the time, and as much stress there is within hospitals, and us being a rural community anyway, people like to get outside, that it was the thing to do was give them a pleasant outside experience as best we can, to give them a little chance to get away from all those other conditions for a while and think about something else. And so we just keep adding to it and have over the years.
Yeah, and I've noticed that lately the recuperative gardens was one of the newer things. So,
Yeah.
what was the whole idea with that? And
Well, that was the idea of you have there's two gardens over there, and one is enclosed with a wall and a gate. I don't know if you've been by that. That's just on the east end of the cancer center.
Okay.
And that was the first one we put in there, and that was an adjunct to the cancer center to make it more home-like and more pleasant for people getting treatment in there and their relatives visiting them, as well as the staff in a very stressful situation, people with cancer. And so the windows come out over it, and we've got two fountains and a little stream and two little bodies of water in that, and a lot of rock, and we built that. And when we put the final touches on getting ready on building the actual waterfalls and things, we had the greenies of the hospital, which were I think most of them were department heads, but others came along and did some of the planning over there. But we had a line carrying rocks and putting them over the liner and all that, and they were all involved in that. So it's kind of their project as well, and that's what I call the healing garden.
Yeah.
And we did that in memory of both my dad and my mother. My dad liked to plant trees. We planted trees wherever we went, as a lot of people in Nebraska used to, because there weren't many trees out in a lot of this country. But my mother loved flowers, and my dad would mow them off, thinking they were weeds. So then we decided to go with also coming in, putting flowers around.
Okay. Well, I just have one more question with you. Kind of goes back to the baseball, because I play soccer, and hopefully after college I want to either play overseas or semi-professional here. So how did you, after being done with baseball and going into work, how did you make that transition, and was it difficult at all?
Was it what?
Was it difficult to transition from, playing baseball for...
Yeah, it was. It was. For a while, because every time spring training time come around, I think, by golly, it'd be kind of nice to go down to spring training. But I knew that we had families started, and I got wrapped up in the game and park stuff, and I was in charge of as chief of land management division of all the reservoirs around McConaughey and Harlan and all the rest of them, where the game commission had any wildlife area, plus other wildlife areas. So I got around, whether I was in the middle of it every day, but it was still a challenging thing.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of activities going on too. But then eventually I got over it. I played a little bit of town team ball, but I didn't. You got to be in shape.
Yeah.
You can't just go out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think I've exhausted all my questions. Do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. You've probably got history of this in here. This McKinley and Lanning,
Yeah.
was the firm that was Lanning.
Mm-hmm.
And there you see
Is that the first?
Lanning. That's Lanning right there. That's the first hospital.
First hospital.
That's Mary in the middle.
Okay.
And that is Mary's mother, Alice Tomlinson, was her maiden name.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is a picture of the hospital after another project.
Yeah.
And there was one, you want to know how many, Ralph Miller up there is another one, along with Ed, that were both instrumental on the hospital board. And Ralph, he was secretary for years and years and years. And he's another one that would qualify for the Mary Lanning
Yeah.
award. Been around a long time. He was around a long time. And there's a lot of them that would. The Froms are others.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that then succeeded. They were partners. At least Tom was with Lanning. And that's one of the frames Lanning's had. These are McKinley and Lanning files for abstracts. This was up at the hospital, but we brought it down here. They had a big long one. We didn't have all the planks in here.
Mm-hmm.
But those are all books down there. They're books that McKinley and Lanning kept way back. And it's amazing how low the costs were, and how
Yeah.
in the Great Recession, in the Great Depression,
Yeah.
back in the 30s, they couldn't even raise enough money just to pay the taxes. Yeah. So the Froms, Tom Fromm, what he did was if the people that owned it, that they'd loaned money to, see, he loaned his own money out as well as insurance companies' money. But if they could pay the taxes, he would forgive the interest, and they could still lease the land, and he'd even loan them money to stay in business. And a lot of those people come back in years later, their sons, their grandsons, and want to borrow money from McKinley and that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stories here.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here.
Goes back to 1879 when they were their business was making loans to homesteaders. And they went out and checked on them. Tom went out and checked on them in a buggy, horse and buggy.
All right. Well, thank you for your time again.
Okay, you're welcome. Got any?